The referendum has gone down. Tom Connell, thanks for your analysis. Let's get a reaction from our panel. Michelle Rowland, our senior member from the government here this evening. It's a wipeout for the Yes campaign by the looks of things.
Well, of course, we accept the decision of the Australian people and is disappointing for those thousands and thousands of volunteers and for people who have been involved in this movement over a very long period of time. But I think one of the key things we have now is to ensure that whilst Australians have said no to this referendum, they certainly have not said no to the need to close the gap and to do better than the status quo. And that is the challenge that is not only before the government, which we gladly pick up, and one of the reasons why we took this referendum forward, but it is also, as has been articulated on this panel tonight, a challenge for all of Australia. To ensure that whatever we do in our respective roles, that we do better for Indigenous Australians. I particularly want to thank so many volunteers who have never been involved in politics before, so many people in my local area whom I had experiences with who do not vote Labor and who decided to get on board with this campaign. People from various faith groups, various community organisations. And I take issue with any description of the migrant communities. I don't think there is such a homogenous thing. And we have even seen, for example, in my area, which is very diverse, so many different community groups come out and campaign strongly in favour of this proposition. It's obviously not succeeded tonight, but my last point I will make is Australians are smart people. Australians and democracy is always the right result. Australians always get it right on these occasions. They know how to differentiate between general elections with referenda, and I think that this again demonstrates the conviction of the Prime Minister to follow through with an election commitment. There will be going through the entrails of every aspect, I'm sure, of this referendum. But ultimately, this was about listening to the First Nations people who said this is the form of recognition they wanted, this is the form of constitutional change they wanted. The Australian people have rejected that today, but it still leaves the big challenge and the big opportunity for the Albanese government to do measurable and practical differences that will improve Indigenous people's lives, to close the gap and make us a better nation overall.
Peter Credlin, you've been opposed to this question from the outset, a strong campaign on the no side and arguments for the no side, but you agree with Michelle Rowland on that need to close the gap. And there's a lot of people of good faith that have argued and voted no today that also know there's a huge discrepancy that needs to be fixed.
I think you'd hardly find an Australian who doesn't think, based on need, not race, the gap right across the board has to be closed, not just in Aboriginal communities, but low-income families where there is disadvantage, older Australians. I mean, let's not make this about race. What we have had tonight is a rejection by the Australian people, using those immortal words of Bob Hawke, that we have no hierarchy of descent, we have no privilege of origin. They have voted to keep the Constitution colourblind. They don't want two classes of citizen in Australia. It doesn't mean they're not going to be committed going forward with what governments might do and want to hold governments to account to close the gap for everyone. I mean, I think we've got a great humanity in Australia. We've seen that in the way people have responded, a couple of exceptions aside to what's happened in Israel. We are a generous country, and I think the Australian people tonight have sent a real shot across the politicians' bow to all of them to say, we decide what this country, the shape this country takes forward into the future. And I think they reject the politics of division. I think they want a very different story written in the pages of history for this country in relation to Aboriginal people. And I think they're celebrating the fact that in the Parliament, chosen by people not based on colour, they're choosing the best representatives they can see in the ballot box to represent them in a federal election. And overwhelmingly, that's 11 Aboriginal people. That says more to me about how close we are coming as a country than the arguments of division.
The most powerful voice of this campaign has been one of those individuals, Senator
Jacinta
Nampijinpa Price.